June 12, 1994. Los Angeles, California. In the heart of one of the most affluent neighborhoods, a tragedy would unfold that would capture the world's attention. Nicole Brown Simpson, the ex-wife of famous football legend O.J. Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman, would meet a brutal fate, slashed repeatedly with a knife, left to die outside her front door. A senseless act, a nightmare in the form of bloodshed, and the ripple effect of that night would reverberate through every corner of the globe. When the bodies of Nicole and Ron were discovered, there were no signs of a struggle. No forced entry. Just pure brutality. The type of violence that speaks of cold, calculated intent. Whoever was responsible knew exactly what they were doing. And they didn't leave any traces behind except for the blood. Amidst the chaos, no one suspected the truth. No one had any reason to think that this crime, this horrific act of violence, could be tied to one of the most famous men in America. No one suspected O.J. Simpson, a superstar athlete, a public figure adored by millions. O.J. Simpson, the beloved sports figure and actor, now found himself at the center of a storm. As news of Nicole and Ron's murders spread, the spotlight turned to him. A bitter divorce, allegations of domestic violence, and a broken marriage made him the prime suspect in this brutal double homicide. Could the man who had seemed so untouchable, so perfect, actually be the murderer? The pursuit that followed was surreal. Millions of Americans watched live as O.J. Simpson, in his white Bronco, sped, or rather, crawled down the freeway. The slow, deliberate pace made it feel less like an escape, and more like an eerie statement. Did O.J. Simpson know he was going to be caught? Or did he believe the spectacle unfolding before millions of eyes would absolve him? Millions of Americans were glued to their screens. What began as a criminal pursuit quickly became a public spectacle, a live broadcast of O.J. Simpson's escape. This surreal moment marked the beginning of one of the most contentious, divisive cases in modern American history. Simpson's trial became a media spectacle unlike any other. With his high-powered legal team by his side, the case was turned into a contest of public opinion, with every word scrutinized, every action dissected. Was O.J. guilty? Or was he the victim of a racially biased system, determined to bring down a prominent black athlete? The trial of O.J. Simpson was more than a courtroom drama. It was a national event. A contest of reputations, strategy, and public opinion. The media frenzy surrounding the case made it a public spectacle, and now the stage was set for one of the most watched trials in history. O.J. Simpson's fate would be decided not just by a jury of his peers, but by the entire country. Johnnie Cochran, a lawyer known for his brilliant strategy and charisma, led O.J. Simpson's defense team. With his signature style, Cochran would dismantle the prosecution's case piece by piece. His team was stacked with some of the best legal minds in America, all prepared to take on the mountain of evidence against their client. But the true challenge lay not in the evidence, it was in the court of public opinion. The prosecution was led by Marcia Clark, a determined and tough attorney, and Christopher Darden, her colleague, who would face Cochran in what many believed would be the trial of the century. Their challenge wasn't just to prove O.J. guilty, it was to do so in front of an audience that was already divided. The nation was watching, waiting for justice to unfold. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. That line delivered by Johnnie Cochran became the turning point of the trial. The defense had pulled off what seemed impossible. The once fatal piece of evidence, the bloody glove, didn't fit O.J.'s hand. And in that moment, Cochran turned the entire case on its head. The courtroom held its breath, and so did America. Even the most damning evidence could be undone with the right strategy. O.J. Simpson's defense team wasn't just fighting for his innocence, they were fighting to manipulate the narrative. They had put the prosecution on the back foot, and the jury, confused and uncertain, was now the key to the future of this trial. But while O.J.'s legal team spun their web of doubt, the victims' families watched from the sidelines. Their pain, their grief, became a backdrop to the drama unfolding before them. For them, it was never about the show. It was about justice. But in the courtroom, justice was becoming a commodity, fought over like any other prize. The world held its breath. After months of testimony, days of deliberation, and a public that had already formed its opinion, the fate of O.J. Simpson hung in the balance. The jury had deliberated, and the moment had finally come. A verdict was about to be read. But what would it be? On October 3, 1995, the decision came. The jury had reached a verdict. All eyes were on the court as the foreperson stood and read aloud the words that would forever change American history. The words were simple. Not guilty. But their impact would be anything but. As the words were spoken, the courtroom erupted. Some cried tears of joy, others wept for what seemed like justice lost. It was a victory for Simpson, but for the victims' families, it was a devastating blow. It wasn't just a legal defeat, it felt like a loss of everything they had been fighting for. The case was closed, but the wounds were far from healed. The nation was divided. Some saw the verdict as a victory against a biased legal system that had tried to bring down a man simply because of his race. Others saw it as a travesty of justice, where the guilty walked free and the victims were denied their voice. No one was untouched by the verdict, and America's social fabric, already fragile, was torn even further. Johnnie Cochran had orchestrated a masterful defense. His team had managed to turn what appeared to be an open and shut case into a fight for justice. For Cochran, the victory was sweet. But for the families of the victims, it was a bitter pill to swallow. A murderer was free, and the shadow of the case loomed larger than ever. Simpson's release was met with cheers by his supporters, but there was no celebration in the eyes of the victims' families. For them, the trial had never been about race or celebrity, it had always been about justice. And that justice had slipped through their fingers. Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were never just victims in a trial. They were real people. Their laughter, their lives, taken away in an instant. But for the families left behind, the memory of them would never fade. Their fight for justice, however, would continue long after the courtroom doors closed. Simpson's acquittal marked the end of the trial, but the case would never truly be over. It would continue to be discussed, debated, and dissected in every corner of America. For years to come, the question would remain, was O.J. Simpson truly guilty, or was he the victim of a system designed to fail him? Though O.J. Simpson had been acquitted in the criminal trial, the civil case was far from over. The families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman would not allow their fight for justice to end with a simple verdict. The families filed a civil suit against Simpson, determined to hold him accountable for their loved ones' deaths. In a legal battle that few could have predicted, the stakes were even higher now. The case was no longer about freedom, it was about responsibility. The civil trial would become a test of accountability. The criminal court may have freed Simpson, but this time, the families weren't looking for a not guilty verdict. They sought justice in a different form, a financial restitution for the lives lost. Their goal, to hold O.J. Simpson financially and publicly accountable for the loss of Nicole and Ron. In this courtroom, the legal team for the Goldmans presented their case with precision. They weren't just showing evidence, they were proving, piece by piece, that O.J. Simpson was responsible for the deaths of Nicole and Ron. No fame, no fortune, no dream team could shield him from this. This trial was different. And the truth was beginning to seep out. For Kim Goldman, the pain of losing her brother was far from over. The civil trial wasn't just about the money. It was about holding Simpson accountable for the horrific crime he committed, for the loss of a brother, a son, and a friend. In this room, the quest for justice was as much about truth as it was about closure. But Simpson wasn't done yet. He wasn't ready to admit guilt. In a deposition that would go down in history, Simpson denied his involvement with a chilling calm. It was clear, he wasn't going to let anyone strip away the life he had built. Not this time. But the truth was coming closer. In February 1997, the civil court reached its conclusion. O.J. Simpson was found liable for the wrongful deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. He was ordered to pay $33.5 million in damages to the victims' families. A civil verdict, a harsh reminder that justice, though delayed, could still come in another form. Simpson's life after the trial was not the same. Though he had escaped criminal conviction, he was now a man forever linked to the deaths of two people. His fortune, his career, his public image, none of it could undo the judgment of the civil court. It was a victory for the victims, and a reminder to the world that, sometimes, justice finds its way even after the public spectacle is over. After the trial, O.J. Simpson tried to return to a life of normalcy, but the shadow of the past lingered, following him wherever he went. Despite the victory in the courtroom, there was no escaping the life he had once lived, the life he had taken from others. For Simpson, the public had never forgotten. The whispers never stopped. O.J. Simpson tried to rebuild his image, to play the role of the celebrity athlete once again. He appeared on golf courses, signing autographs, smiling for the cameras. But even the most carefully crafted smile couldn't erase the blood that stained his past. The public was always watching. The question was no longer about his innocence, it was about whether he could live a life worthy of the freedom he had been granted. Despite the acquittal, O.J. Simpson remained the subject of endless media scrutiny. The cameras, the reporters, they all wanted something from him. They wanted answers, they wanted closure. But O.J. had nothing to give. He had been acquitted, but in the court of public opinion, he would never truly be free. O.J. Simpson never truly disappeared from the spotlight. Despite the verdict, despite the years, he was always a walking contradiction. A man celebrated as a hero by some, a murderer by others. He was trapped in a world that refused to let him escape, haunted by the very fame that had once defined him. O.J. Simpson's life of fame would eventually come crashing down once again. It wasn't the trial that would haunt him for the rest of his days, but the long road of legal trouble that followed. In 2007, Simpson was arrested for armed robbery, another dark chapter in a life that seemed destined to be full of them. In 2008, O.J. Simpson was convicted of robbery and kidnapping. He was sentenced to 33 years in prison, though he would later be granted parole in 2017. The media circus around him had finally come full circle, but it was clear O.J. Simpson was a man whose fate had long been sealed, not by the courts, but by the ghosts of his past. Today, O.J. Simpson lives in the shadows of his former life. Behind prison bars, he remains a figure trapped between two worlds, one where he was a champion, and one where he is a criminal, forever marked by the sins of his past. He may be free again, but he will never escape the legacy of his crimes. In 2017, O.J. Simpson was granted parole. After serving nearly 9 years for the robbery charges, he was released from prison. But his time behind bars hadn't erased his past. The murder trial, the acquittal, the families left in pain, it all followed him out of those gates. O.J. Simpson may be free, but the question remains, did justice truly prevail? And can any verdict truly bring closure to the families who lost so much? His life is a testament to the complexities of justice, fame, and the world's unrelenting pursuit of truth. Years after his acquittal and release from prison, O.J. Simpson remains one of the most polarizing figures in American history. A symbol of fame, a symbol of tragedy, a symbol of justice, or the lack of it. His life is no longer just about a man who played football, it's about a legacy defined by a trial that captivated the world and a crime that shook a nation. But the question still lingers, how will history remember O.J. Simpson? Simpson's public appearances are now a spectacle in themselves. No longer the adored football star, he's become a figure of constant scrutiny. Whether he's speaking at a dinner, attending a public event, or simply walking down the street, the eyes of the world are upon him. Some admire his resilience, others see him as a ghost from the past, a man who can never outrun his mistakes. The question, however, is this: who will decide how O.J. Simpson is remembered? The media circus that surrounded Simpson's trial never truly ended. The public's fascination with his case and life continues to fuel debates. Documentaries are made, books are written, and every new interview he gives adds fuel to the fire. But why does O.J. Simpson continue to hold such an iron grip on the public's attention? Why does a case decided so many years ago still spark so much passion, so much controversy? The obsession with Simpson isn't confined to TV screens and books. It has found a new home in the world of true crime podcasts. Discussions about the case have evolved, from a sensationalized trial to a nuanced debate about race, justice, and America's darkest secrets. Some argue that Simpson is a scapegoat, others still point to the evidence and insist he's guilty. But regardless of the conclusion, the public can't seem to get enough. They continue to seek answers, they continue to ask questions about Simpson, and about themselves. Simpson may have left behind the spotlight, but his name still reverberates through every corner of his past. His house, now a relic of his former life, sits quietly. The parties, the laughter, the fame gone. What remains is a man whose past cannot be erased, whose story continues to fascinate and haunt in equal measure. Does O.J. Simpson truly regret the path he's taken, or has he accepted the strange reality of living under the weight of his own legacy? Today, O.J. Simpson lives his life in the shadows of a world that once celebrated him. He may have walked free after serving time for robbery, but the true cost of his actions remains unpaid. For Simpson, freedom has come at a price that can never be truly quantified. His legacy is one of confusion, grief, and lost opportunities, a man who could never escape his dark past. In the end, the O.J. Simpson case will always be remembered as one of the most complex, controversial, and tragic moments in modern history. The murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman remains unsolved in the eyes of many. But for others, justice was served. The truth, however, is elusive, a shadow that will always hang over the lives lost and the man who will forever be remembered for the crimes that still haunt us. On October 1, 2017, after serving 9 years for armed robbery, O.J. Simpson was granted parole and released from prison. After more than 2 decades of living in the spotlight, after being the most famous figure in America due to the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, Simpson was free again. Simpson's release wasn't the end of his saga, but merely the beginning of a new chapter, one where the public's gaze would shift once more toward him. How would he navigate the world that had so publicly tried him, and how would he face a world that still hadn't forgotten the crimes he was never convicted for? Simpson, who had been once the picture of wealth, fame, and privilege, was now in a very different world. His mansion in Brentwood was gone, and the spotlight was no longer on him in the same way. Was this life after prison the redemption he had long sought, or was it just a slow march toward being forgotten? In his interviews after release, Simpson expressed his desire to live a peaceful life. He spoke of finding God, of staying out of trouble, and of enjoying his remaining years. Yet, despite his calm exterior, his past is never far from the surface. Could a man who had been accused of murder ever truly escape his past, or would the weight of his crimes forever hang over him? Though Simpson attempted to return to normalcy, he was never truly free. Everywhere he went, eyes followed him. The claps, the smiles, the questions, they didn't come from admiration anymore, but from a haunting curiosity. The man who once was adored by millions was now the subject of intrigue, suspicion, and fear. Simpson's case remains a dividing line in America. Some see his release as a second chance, a man who has paid his dues and deserves to live his life. Others see a murderer who was never held accountable, a man who was able to escape the justice system. The public's feelings about Simpson are as complex as the case itself. Was his punishment enough? Should he be allowed to live freely? The media continues to latch onto O.J. Simpson's life as though it were a soap opera that never ended. They crave the details, the drama. But the truth is more terrifying than any headline. Simpson's story, his legacy, is tied to violence and death. He can run from the cameras, but his past will never leave him. Simpson's freedom is a strange one, for it's not just the absence of physical bars that bind him. He remains locked in the cage of his own notoriety. The paradox: he is free, but also eternally imprisoned by the crime that can never be undone. As O.J. Simpson lives out his post-prison life, the questions persist. Is he truly free? Has justice been served? And can a man ever truly erase the blood that has stained his history? O.J. Simpson, once the center of the most high-profile trial in history, now sat across from detectives in an interrogation room. A man whose past had been filled with evasion, deflections, and denials. But in this moment, this final chapter, there were no more excuses. Would he finally confess? Would the truth, long hidden, finally come to light? Simpson had always claimed innocence. For years, he denied his involvement in the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. But here, in this sterile room, with no cameras flashing, no audience watching, he had nowhere to hide. The detectives knew this was their chance. Could they finally break through the wall of silence? For years, Simpson had lived with the knowledge that his role in those murders was clear, his involvement undeniable. He had methodically planned each step, each detail, much like the predator he had been. He had to know that one day, the truth would be dragged from the depths of his carefully constructed lies. The night of June 12, 1994, was supposed to be like any other. Nicole had invited Ron Goldman over. But the shadows that stalked their every move were already set into motion. As Simpson approached, his mind was already made up. His actions would forever change the course of history. In this moment of revelation, Simpson's voice cracks just slightly, betraying the man who had spent years constructing a false narrative. The words that left his lips didn't offer forgiveness. They didn't bring justice. They simply confirmed what many had always suspected: O.J. Simpson was a man driven by anger, by resentment, by something darker than any public persona could hide. This confession was not the release of guilt. It was the culmination of a life lived in denial. The confession, though long awaited, was unsettling, a glimpse into the mind of a man who had lived a double life, one that would forever be scrutinized and analyzed, dissected under the public's unyielding gaze. The trial was a spectacle. The glove moment, perhaps the most famous of all, became the cornerstone of Simpson's defense. The prosecution's case crumbled under the weight of doubts and sensational legal tactics. But despite the absurdity of that moment, the public was left with only one undeniable truth: Simpson had committed the murders. The court of public opinion would never truly set him free. In the end, Simpson was acquitted. The verdict, hailed by some as a victory, became a defining moment in American history. It exposed the cracks in the legal system, the flaws of a trial that had been about more than just murder. For many, the question of guilt was never answered. It simply became another chapter in the saga of O.J. Simpson, a man who was never truly free. They never had the chance to see justice for themselves. Their lives were taken in a brutal and senseless act. But their memories live on, not in the man who took them, but in the world that still asks, was justice ever truly served? The O.J. Simpson case will forever remain etched in the history of America's legal system. The verdict, the trial, the spectacle, it was more than just a murder case. It was the intersection of race, fame, justice, and the media. A story that divided the nation, that gripped the world, and still lingers in the minds of many. After serving 9 years in prison for his 2007 armed robbery conviction, O.J. Simpson was granted parole. But even this new chapter of his life would not go unnoticed. For a man whose past was defined by notoriety, how could his future ever truly be free from the ghosts of his past? Simpson's release was just another chapter in his long and controversial life. For O.J. Simpson, freedom was a strange thing. He walked out of prison after serving time, but the burden of his past crimes remained. The world watched his every step, the media buzzing around him like vultures waiting for the next scandal. What did freedom mean to a man who had been locked away for so long? Could he ever be truly free? Though Simpson was acquitted in the criminal case, the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman sought justice in civil court. In 1997, a jury found Simpson liable for the deaths of both victims, awarding the Goldman family $33.5 million in damages. A painful reminder that the legal system, in all its intricacies, still had a reckoning for O.J. Simpson. His legal battles were far from over. The public's obsession with his guilt would continue to evolve, and the question of responsibility lingered. Simpson's legal troubles didn't end with his release from prison. The civil trial was another chapter that kept the case alive in the public eye. For the Goldman family, the court ruling was a small measure of justice, but it could never bring back their son. For Simpson, it was yet another loss, a reminder that the shadows of his past would never fade. Despite the years of controversy, O.J. Simpson found a way to stay in the public eye. He made his way onto social media, interacting with fans, posting selfies, and sharing his thoughts. But the more he tweeted, the more the public's curiosity about him grew. His tweets were mundane, but his life was anything but ordinary. Every update was an invitation for people to engage with a man who had killed yet never faced true consequences. Simpson's attempts to live a normal life were under constant scrutiny. Everywhere he went, there were people watching, gossiping. It was as if the world couldn't decide if he was guilty, innocent, or something in between. No matter how hard he tried to blend into society, his presence was always marked by the lingering questions: what did he really do? And why has he never been held accountable? In the end, O.J. Simpson's life, his legacy, and his actions remain a deep scar on the fabric of American society. The murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman have never been truly solved in the hearts and minds of the public. No matter how much time passes, the questions will never cease. Was justice truly served? Can a man ever truly escape his past? The O.J. Simpson case is often remembered as one of the most publicized, divisive trials in American history. It was a trial that transcended the world of crime, celebrity, and the justice system. It became a spectacle. Yet, despite the media frenzy, despite the years of investigation and scrutiny, the real truth still feels elusive. The O.J. Simpson case was more than a fight for justice, it was a fight for public perception. It raised questions about race, class, and the integrity of the legal system. Could the rich and famous truly escape accountability? Could a celebrity ever be treated like any other defendant? For many, the case was more about social dynamics than the actual murder of two innocent victims. The verdict was met with outrage from some and celebration from others. But in the hearts of the Goldman family, there was only loss. The question of whether O.J. Simpson was guilty or innocent would never fully go away. For many, he was the man who got away with murder, and for others, he was the victim of a corrupt system that failed to deliver true justice. And yet, the true victims were never forgotten. Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were young, full of life, and with their futures ahead of them. Their tragic deaths were buried beneath layers of legal battles, media theatrics, and public opinion. But for those who loved them, the loss was real, and the answers, never enough. As the years passed, the question of justice faded from the spotlight. The streets of Los Angeles moved on, the world continued, but the ghost of the trial remained. Did Simpson truly kill his ex-wife and her friend, or was he framed by a broken justice system? The debates continue, but no one seems to have the answer. The case is closed, but the wounds remain open. Decades later, the case is still a subject of fascination. People across the world still ask questions. Was O.J. Simpson guilty? Did the system fail? And if he was guilty, why was justice never served? The truth, as we have learned, is not always found in courtrooms or verdicts. It lies in the heart of the people who continue to search for closure. O.J. Simpson will always be remembered as one of the most controversial figures in modern American history. His legacy will forever be tied to the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, regardless of what the courts said. The truth will forever be elusive, but the questions will continue. For Nicole and Ron, there will be no more trials, no more debates. Their names will echo forever, as will the question, why were they taken from us? And why were they never given the justice they deserved? As the years pass, the city of Los Angeles moves on, the streets teeming with life as if the past never happened. But beneath the hustle and bustle of daily life, the ghosts of the past linger, especially in the minds of those who lived through the trial of the century. The O.J. Simpson case was not just a story of a man and his guilt. It was a story about a nation, a system, and the deep fractures in our society. For some, the O.J. Simpson case was about race, about the systematic racial disparities that have plagued the justice system for centuries. For others, it was about the power of celebrity, how the famous and wealthy can sometimes escape the very justice they once stood under. But in the end, what it exposed was the fragility of the system, the cracks in the foundation of what we believe to be fair. The court's decision did not end the debate, it only fueled it. Some argue that O.J. Simpson got away with murder, others maintain that the system failed him. The question of justice and whether it was truly served remains one of the most contested in history. Simpson's trial did not just change him, it changed us all. Simpson may have walked away from the criminal trial with an acquittal, but the truth of who he was, what he did, and why remains trapped within him. His life after the trial continued, but the world looked at him differently. The public eye never truly let him go. They watched, waited, and questioned. The true victims, the ones whose names should forever be etched in our memories, were the families of Nicole and Ron. Their stories have been overshadowed by the spectacle of the trial. Ron Goldman, a young man with his life ahead of him, Nicole Brown Simpson, a mother who dreamed of a better life, both lost, and their families left behind to cope with an injustice that can never be undone. The verdict, read in that tense silence, did not provide closure. It sparked a nationwide divide, where opinions on justice were split. Some celebrated, others mourned. But neither side won, for there could never be a winner in a case this public, this complex, and this emotionally charged. The O.J. Simpson case, more than just about a murder trial, was a reflection of our collective struggle. A struggle for truth, justice, and understanding. And as we move forward, the questions that were raised will never truly be answered. Did Simpson do it? Or was he framed? The truth, much like the man himself, is now just another shadow, hidden in plain sight. The case of O.J. Simpson is not just about murder, it's about the unspoken truths we all live with, the flaws in our systems, and the shadows we refuse to acknowledge. Maybe the truth doesn't always come out when the gavel strikes. Maybe, just maybe, we're not ready to face it yet. The O.J. Simpson case was never just about a man, a murder, or a verdict. It was about how we, as a society, confront the shadows within our justice system, within our media, and even within ourselves. It was about a fight for justice that transcended the lives of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman and reached deep into the heart of America. The public may have moved on, but O.J. Simpson remains a ghost. A man who, for some, was a victim of the system, and for others, a killer who got away with murder. But does time heal wounds? Or does it only create more questions? Simpson's life after the trial is just another chapter in the ongoing saga of a man trying to outrun the ghosts of his past. That moment in the courtroom, when the jury said not guilty, wasn't just the end of a trial. It was the beginning of a nation's divide, a split between those who believed in Simpson's innocence and those who believed justice had failed. The trial was over, but the wounds were just beginning to fester. Behind the spectacle, the stories of families forever broken remain. Nicole and Ron are still gone. Their families still grieving, still searching for closure. And O.J. Simpson. He may walk free, but his actions have left a mark on all of us, a mark that no court, no media, and no celebrity could ever erase. The gavel has fallen, but the echoes of this trial are still with us. The O.J. Simpson case left behind questions that no verdict could answer. It shattered the belief in a system that was supposed to protect us all. But the real cost wasn't just the trial. It was. In the end, the O.J. Simpson case was not just about a murder. It was a story of a broken system, a flawed pursuit of justice, and the power of perception. It will forever be a chapter in American history that we can't erase, a chapter that continues to shape the conversations around race, justice, and fame in the years that followed. But perhaps the biggest question of all is this: can justice truly ever be served when the truth is so elusive? O.J. Simpson, Nicole Brown Simpson, Ron Goldman, and all of us who have witnessed this unfold, we are left with the same unanswered question: what really happened that night? The story of O.J. Simpson will never have a clear ending. It will never be resolved in a way that satisfies everyone. But perhaps, that is the ultimate lesson of this case, that justice, much like the truth, is often something we can never fully grasp. For some, O.J. Simpson is a symbol of injustice. For others, he is a victim of circumstances. But for all of us, he will forever be a reminder that truth and justice are often more complicated than we want them to be. And the legacy of this case will continue to haunt us, for generations to come.